The wind howled through the broken windows of the abandoned hospital in Hokkaido, a relic of a bygone era now swallowed by nature and neglect. The photographer, Kenji, stepped carefully over the debris, his camera hanging from his neck. He had come here seeking the beauty and decay, the stories etched into the peeling walls and rusted bed frames. But as he moved deeper into the hospital, the air grew heavier, filled with a silence that seemed to press against his ears. The wards, once bustling with life, now stood empty, save for the occasional rustle of leaves blown in by the wind. Kenji's heart raced as he entered what appeared to be a children's ward. The walls were adorned with faded murals of cartoon characters, their smiles now twisted by time into something unsettling. He raised his camera, capturing the eerie beauty of the scene. Then, he heard it. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but soon unmistakable, the sound of children whispering. The whispers seemed to come from every direction, yet the ward was undeniably empty. Kenji's breath quickened, his hands trembling as he lowered his camera. The whispers grew louder, forming words he couldn't understand, but filled with a sadness that chilled him to the bone. He tried to rationalize it, the wind, his imagination, anything, but the dread settling in his stomach was undeniable. Panic set in as the whispers seemed to surround him, closer now, almost as if they were right beside him. Kenji turned to leave, his footsteps echoing loudly in the empty corridor. But the whispers followed, growing more insistent, more desperate. He broke into a run, the hospital's once familiar layout now a maze of shadows and whispers. Just as he reached the entrance, the whispers stopped abruptly, leaving behind a silence more terrifying than the noise. Kenji emerged into the daylight, gasping for air, his heart pounding. He looked back at the hospital, its windows like empty eyes watching him. The photos he took that day showed nothing out of the ordinary, but the sound he captured, a faint, indistinct whispering, defied all explanation. To this day, Kenji avoids abandoned buildings, especially hospitals. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he swears he can still hear the children whispering, calling him back to that forgotten ward in Hokkaido. Break time equals 5s, greater than the journey to the onsen town was supposed to be a retreat, a chance to disconnect from the chaos of city life and immerse in the tranquility of Japan's countryside. The traveler, Alex, had read about this place in an old guidebook, a hidden gem, it said, where the hot springs were untouched by modernization. But as Alex stepped off the nearly empty train, the silence was oppressive. The town was eerily deserted, the streets lined with shuttered shops and homes that looked as if they hadn't been inhabited in years. The only sound was the distant gurgle of hot springs, a constant reminder of the life that once thrived here. The air was thick with steam, reducing visibility to just a few feet ahead. It was beautiful, in a haunting way, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The first night passed without incident, save for the unsettling quiet. But on the second evening, as Alex soaked in the outdoor onsen under a moonlit sky, the voice came. It was faint at first, barely audible over the bubbling water. Alex. It was a whisper, soft and airy, as if carried by the steam itself. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The voice was unmistakable, it had called their name. Looking around, there was no one in sight. The rational part of Alex's mind tried to dismiss it as the wind or a trick of the ears, but the primal part screamed danger. The next day, Alex decided to explore the town, hoping to find signs of life or at least an explanation. The further they ventured, the more the town seemed to resist, with doors that wouldn't open and paths that looped back on themselves. And always, the whispering followed, growing louder, more insistent. Alex. It was no longer just a whisper but a chorus, coming from all directions, from the steam, the shadows, the very air. Panic set in. Alex ran, but the town's layout had changed, the streets twisting into a labyrinth with no exit. The climax came at dusk, as Alex stood in the center of the town square, surrounded by the whispering shadows. The voices were no longer calling a name but speaking in tongues, a cacophony of sounds that made no sense yet filled Alex with an overwhelming sense of dread. Then, as suddenly as it began, the voices stopped. The steam cleared, revealing the town as it was, empty, silent. Alex was alone, but the feeling of being watched remained. The experience left no physical marks, but the psychological scars were deep. Alex left the town at first light, never looking back. Yet, sometimes, in the quiet moments, the whispering returns, a reminder that some corners of the world are best left forgotten. The ending is ambiguous, leaving the reader to wonder if the phenomena were real or a figment of Alex's stressed mind. The unease lingers, a testament to the power of the unseen and the unknown. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air in Tokyo's forgotten underground tunnels was thick with the scent of damp concrete and rust, a testament to decades of neglect. Kazuki, an avid urban explorer, had ventured into these depths seeking the thrill of discovery, the allure of the unknown. His flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing walls scarred by time and graffiti. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of water and the occasional scuttle of rats. Kazuki's heart raced with excitement, but beneath it, a thread of unease began to weave through his thoughts. He had heard stories of these tunnels, whispers of shadows that moved without light, of breaths felt but not seen. He scoffed at such tales, yet here he was, his skin prickling with an inexplicable chill. Then, as if responding to his skepticism, an icy breath caressed the back of his neck. Kazuki spun around, his flashlight beam slicing through the empty tunnel. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice echoing into the void. No answer came. He stood still, straining his ears for any sound, but the silence was absolute. The rational part of his mind insisted it was just a draft, but the primal part screamed danger. Deciding to press on, Kazuki's steps were cautious, his senses hyper-alert. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, the darkness ahead swallowing his light. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, they grew in volume, a cacophony of voices speaking in no language he recognized. They seemed to come from all directions, yet no figures appeared. Kazuki's breath came in short gasps, his hands trembling. "This isn't real," he muttered to himself, a mantra against the rising tide of fear. But the whispers only grew louder, more insistent, as if arguing with him. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered, then died, plunging him into darkness. The whispers ceased, leaving a silence so profound it was deafening. Kazuki fumbled for his spare light, but before he could switch it on, he felt it, the unmistakable sensation of fingers brushing against his cheek. With a cry, he stumbled backward, hitting the wall. His spare light flared to life, revealing the tunnel empty once more. Heart pounding, Kazuki knew he had to leave. He turned to retrace his steps, but the path he had come from was gone, replaced by a solid wall. The whispers returned, now a single voice, whispering his name. Kazuki's scream was lost in the darkness as the light faded once more, leaving only the whispers and the cold, unseen fingers that reached out from the shadows. The tunnels remained silent, as if they had never been disturbed, holding their secrets close. Kazuki's fate, like so many before him, became just another whisper in the dark. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air in Kyoto was thick with the scent of cherry blossoms, a stark contrast to the desolate alleyway I found myself in. My name is Dr. Elena Carter, a cultural anthropologist with a penchant for the forgotten. Today, my research led me to the heart of Kyoto's red light district, now a ghostly shadow of its former self. Among the remnants of its bustling past stood an abandoned love hotel, its neon sign flickering weakly against the dimming sky. My goal was simple: document the architectural and cultural significance of these spaces before they were lost to time. But what I found was far beyond the scope of my academic pursuits. The hotel's exterior was a patchwork of peeling paint and broken windows, a silent testament to the years of neglect. As I stepped inside, the musty odor of decay assaulted my senses, mingling with a faint, unrecognizable scent that made my skin crawl. The lobby was frozen in time, with dusty reception desks and faded posters advertising rooms by the hour. My camera clicked methodically, capturing the eerie stillness. It wasn't until I reached the third floor that the atmosphere shifted. The hallway seemed to stretch unnaturally long, the walls whispering secrets in a language just beyond my comprehension. Room 303 called to me, its door slightly ajar as if expecting my arrival. Inside, the air was heavier, charged with an emotion so potent it was almost tangible. I felt a sudden, overwhelming sadness, a despair that wasn't mine. My hands trembled as I set up my equipment, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. The room was ordinary in its decay, a tattered bed, a broken mirror, and walls stained with the echoes of past passions. But then, the whispers started. Soft at first, they grew into a cacophony of sobs and pleas, a symphony of heartbreak that seemed to emanate from the very walls. My breath came in short gasps as the temperature plummeted, my own reflection in the cracked mirror distorting into something unrecognizable. The sadness was no longer just around me, it was inside me, a parasite feeding on my fear. I needed to leave, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled my bones. The whispers crescendoed into screams, the shadows on the walls moving with a life of their own. In that moment, I understood. This room was a vessel, a collector of sorrows from those who had loved and lost within its walls. And now, it wanted me to stay, to add my despair to its collection. With a strength born of sheer terror, I wrenched the door open and fled, the whispers chasing me down the hall. I never looked back, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I can still hear them, the whispering shadows, calling me home. My research was never published. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the night was unusually quiet as Tetsuo made his rounds around the abandoned factory on the outskirts of Osaka. The place had been shut down for years, a relic of Japan's booming industrial past now left to decay. Tetsuo, a night watchman, had taken the job out of necessity, but the isolation and the eerie silence of the place had always unnerved him. Tonight, however, the air felt heavier, as if the shadows themselves were watching him. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the rusted skeletons of machinery and the occasional scuttle of a rat. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a shadow, long and distorted, moving against the far wall. There was no light source to cast such a shadow, no one else in the factory. Tetsuo's heart pounded in his chest as he turned, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The shadow was gone, but the feeling of being watched remained. He tried to rationalize it, a trick of the light, his tired mind playing games. But then he heard it, a whisper so faint he wasn't sure if it was real or just the wind. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a murmur just beyond comprehension. Tetsuo's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he backed away, his back hitting the cold metal of a machine. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if trying to tell him something. Then, the shadows around him began to shift, stretching and twisting in impossible ways. Tetsuo's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor, his flashlight rolling away, its beam flickering before dying out. In the darkness, the whispers became screams, and the shadows closed in. When the sun rose, Tetsuo was gone, his flashlight found in the middle of the factory floor, its glass shattered as if from a great force. The only sign of his presence was a single, terrified scream captured on the factory's outdated security system, a scream that ended as abruptly as it began. The authorities found nothing, no trace of Tetsuo, no explanation for what had happened. The factory remained, silent and empty, its shadows waiting for the next unwary soul to wander into their grasp. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the air was crisp, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and whispers of the ancient world. Shikoku's mountains loomed around me, their peaks hidden by a mist that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I had come here seeking solitude, a break from the relentless pace of Tokyo, but as I trudged along the narrow path, the silence began to weigh on me. It was too quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the occasional sigh of the wind through the pines. Then I saw them, stones, each no larger than my fist, arranged in a perfect line leading off the path and into the underbrush. My curiosity piqued, I followed. The stones were placed with such precision, each exactly a foot apart, guiding me deeper into the forest. The further I went, the heavier the air became, thick with a scent I couldn't place, earthy, yet metallic, like old blood. My heart began to race, a primal part of me screaming to turn back, but my feet moved on their own, compelled by an unseen force. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff. Below, the mist swirled, hiding the valley floor. The stones led right to the edge, as if inviting me to step off. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. I could feel it, the pull, an almost physical force urging me forward. My toes hung over the abyss, my body swaying dangerously. Then, a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. It came again, louder, a chorus of voices murmuring in a language I didn't understand. The sound seemed to come from the mist itself, rising up to envelop me. I stumbled back, my survival instinct finally kicking in. The whispers followed, growing more insistent, more angry. I ran, branches whipping at my face, the stones now seeming to shift under my feet, trying to trip me. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands shaking too badly to turn the key. As I drove away, the whispers faded, but the image of those perfectly arranged stones remained burned into my mind. I told myself it was just the wind, just my imagination. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I hear them again, the whispering shadows, calling me back to the edge.